Hi, welcome to the Unconquered Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm your host. My name is Sean Shakarama. My podcast is all about providing a free platform for other entrepreneurs and like-minded people to share their stories, tell a little bit more about themselves. As you know, creating content is time-consuming and costly. If you enjoy my podcast and my content, I'd ask that you please support me by buying my book, Resonate: Principles of Peak Performance. It's available on Amazon, and it's even free for Amazon Kindle users who have Kindle Unlimited. This book gives you an outline of principles that all but guarantee success in your personal and your professional life, and you'll learn a little bit more about my story as well. Also, I'm proud to announce a brand new partnership with Impact Health Share. If you're priced out of traditional health insurance, Impact Health Share might be able to save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in healthcare coverage for you and your family. And lastly, if you'd like my help to build a residual income for yourself, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to share these opportunities with you. I'll drop all the links below, and thanks again for tuning in. Hey, welcome to the Unconquered Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 3. I have an amazing special guest here, dear friend, client, Mr. David Buck. David, you are really kind of a Renaissance man interested in just a plethora of different things, mental health expert. But why don't you just take a minute and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Sean, for having me. I am CFO of Tailored Counseling Group. That's kind of my proper title, I guess, what I'm professionally known as. I am a psychotherapist by trade myself, so we're called licensed professional counselors here in the state of Texas. I got my start in mental health just kind of on a whim, frankly. I used to be pre-med. My father is a medical physician, and I just always wanted to be able to do something, serve others, treat others, whatever that looked like. Of course, coming from a more medical background, that's how I conceptualized it for a good majority of my life. And then in college, I realized that psychology was my muse and that everything about the mind and mental health really just fascinated me to a level that I couldn't kind of get away from it. So swapped, did everything that I told my friends I would never do, changed my major, the whole 9 yards, and then just kind of barreled into mental health as a whole and found counseling to be the best way to serve individuals, not necessarily getting lost in the numbers when not appropriate, but just being able to make real personal connections with other individuals. And through counseling, I ended up running into Dr. Taylor himself, the CEO of Taylor Counseling Group. And just randomly, he and I were wrapping up both of our on-site trainings he was doing his doctoral stuff and I was just wrapping up my master's level. And it was just kind of, a chance of fate. And he's like, hey, we're getting lunch. We're going to talk. We're going to meet. And then just from there, it kind of blossomed into a great friendship, mentorship, and took it all the way from his first intern all the way up to his second in command as CFO.
I was going to say it's fairly unique, especially for the size and scale. Tailored Counseling Group is one of the largest mental health providers in the state of Texas, and I don't have numbers in front of me, but I would just go ahead and make it. It's probably a fair assumption if you're one of the largest, if not the largest in the state of Texas, you're probably one of the largest in the entire country.
Sure. I mean, Texans are definitely going to argue that, right? We're bigger than,
So,
yeah.
but I bring that up to say that you're obviously very skilled in a number of different disciplines, because for someone to also be a practitioner as well as a CFO, that's a little bit non-traditional with a larger,
Sure.
more mid-sized, more mid-market firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, non-traditional for sure. And it's kind of one of the reasons why I think Tailored Counseling Group works well. Everyone is a counselor or is in school to be a counselor or some sort of mental health professional, whether it's, LPC, LMFT, so the marriage and family therapist, or the social workers. So everyone's got training and or fully licensed themselves. So that's kind of phenomenal because no matter who you're talking to, top to bottom, you have somebody who, at least to an extent, can empathize with what you're working on, has a clinical background enough to kind of get you where you need to be and help you as best as possible, whether it's the actual therapy itself or just asking about a medical bill or rescheduling an appointment, right? So I enjoy the fact that we have a non-traditional approach, and I'm very grateful that even as CFO, I can't let go of doing therapy. I mean, I'll be frank, I don't necessarily need to see clients anymore myself, but it's what I love. It's my passion. I'm going to do it until they either force me to stop for other reasons or whatever. It's some sort of incapacitation. It's nothing I ever see myself retiring from. Dr. Irvin Yalom is an individual, a very well known psychiatrist. He wrote a lot of my textbooks, funny enough, which I thought was pretty wild that someone could write a textbook that was for a college student, legible, exciting to read, interesting. And of course, he's read like Love's Executioners, the big popular book. I mean, that guy, he just keeps going and going and going. There's nothing that stops him. And I just kind of always thought of him as just someone to look up to in the mental health space. And I'm like, hey, if he can do it that long, I would love to see if I can do it that long. So it keeps me in touch with why we do things. It's easy to get lost in the sauce. It's easy to kind of look at all the numbers and figure out, how things need to be, how we're going to make money to keep the lights on. But the fact that I have that extra connection to the people and what we actually do, it just keeps me aligned with our goals, our culture, and I think it just makes the whole process more authentic.
Yeah, no, one of the things that I really appreciated working with you guys is that, non-traditional aspect of everyone has to be plugged in as a
Mm,
practitioner of some kind is we've touched on this before. We're of course both in business and our
mm,
businesses are to help people, but we're in business for a bigger vision than just, making a profit, which is important. But
mm,
we talked about how important it is to kind of bring your whole self, your authentic self into your workplace, into your personal life.
mm,
And, one thing that gets lost in translation in the industry, especially working with some of the more larger healthcare organizations, is the leadership
mm.
are not practitioners.
Right.
And there's a disconnection between the importance of quality patient care
Mm,
and the business aspect of running a successful organization. And I'm not going to try to say one is really more important than the other, because
right.
they both have to coexist together. But I think one of the reasons why, our relationship has been so fruitful in both business success but also personal success is because of the fact that Taylor Counseling Group does understand the importance of the business aspect,
Mm,
but also understands the importance of quality care and
mm.
actually building relationships, even maybe with, I'm sure you can speak to it more, even maybe with parties and people that aren't your favorite to work with all the time.
Sure. Yeah. And like you said, it's hard. There are days where sometimes you feel like one or the other is more important, but walking that tightrope, essentially trying to find that balance. I think it's good because it's always a healthy challenge. But at the same time, again, even being more, classically trained as a therapist myself, I like the idea that, and I would want it honestly the same way if the roles were reversed and I'm going to the doctor myself, and it comes down to, okay, it's decision time. What are we going to do about this bill? Are we going to write it off? Are we going to charge it? Is the client stuck, holding everything? Good luck. Have a nice day. I would hope that that person has a level of compassion. You went to them for help, and that's what we're there to do. We're there to help. So, of course, in those cases, the therapist in me, just the genuine human in me, is going to override and be like, well, we're gonna write it off then. Like, they came here for help. The last thing we're doing is adding more problems to this poor individual's life. So I like that. I learned that from my father. I learned a lot of lessons from my father, but one of the things that got me into private practice originally was I actually worked with him in his private practice, and he was a very good doctor, great physician, and his heart was so big, it did make it very difficult for him to run an effective business. He was constantly, butting heads with insurance companies, which is definitely the leading to what I'm sure we're going to talk about here shortly. Sometimes we have to play nice with individuals who don't play nice with us. But it's the first time I experienced insurance companies from that professional standpoint, was watching him trying to operate a practice and then being told, like, hey, your patient isn't covered. Sorry, you send them the bill. He refused. I mean, as much as, no offense to my sweet mother, she was more on the analytical side. She was like, absolutely not, Randy, we're not doing this. He just wouldn't do it. And eventually, he moved on from private practice because he realized he did struggle with that balance. And honestly, I'm proud of him. I'm glad he struggled in the right direction, right? Having the heart for the client, for the patient. So it was a good lesson to learn, because I do believe that should be the core value. My little lapel pin, I'm sure it's hard to read, is we have different core values at our company. And a big one that I love is collaborative growth. And a big part of that is understanding that we only grow together. And it's hard to grow when you're constantly pushing your client down with financial burdens, whether it's your fault or not. If we can try to step in and provide not only that quality of care, but the affordability of care, I think it's very important, and it does allow us to continue to work together. But insurance, again, back to probably the point to focus on, moving forward, they are the big obvious party that does make things difficult. It's a very uncomfortable cha-cha. I like to joke with my friends. You learn how to kind of dance with them. Sometimes it feels more like a sparring session, but if you can focus on it as more of a collaborative dance, I think that's a little bit more effective.
And that's a big core value of my company, is trying to find collaboration, trying to find mutual value, trying to find win-win situations. And some situations, some insurance companies are more difficult than others. You know, to lend a little bit of objectivity
Mm.
is, and we've talked about this, is unfortunately, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and have other psychotherapists on, other counselors, is I'm a big believer, and I think you'd agree, and I think people who have gone and sought any type of help from a mental health perspective would agree that a lot of things in life, especially when it comes to our physical bodies, call it disease, aches, pains, even migraines, a
Mm.
lot of that is tied up to your inner emotional health, your inner emotional well-being. And unfortunately, to some degree, because, the physical side of medicine, the anatomy of the body, is extremely important. But we talked
Mm.
about how, kind of during the Renaissance period, 16, 1700s, um, a lot of the first scientists were actually like grave
Mm.
diggers. If you go back and look in history books, and they
Right.
were digging up graves to open up corpses and
Mm.
to understand the human anatomy. And that's kind of was a genesis point of Western medicine deviating from more ancient civilization, or what people would think of as Eastern philosophy, Eastern
Right.
mindset. And as time went on, because it's something, my personal opinion is, because it's something you can touch and feel the body,
Mm.
a lot of research, a lot of investment dollars was put into the physical side of medicine. How do we cut this off or cut this open? How do we,
Right.
replace this bone in the fracture? And all that stuff is important, but it led to kind of a dismissal
Mm.
of the stuff that you can't see, that's
Right.
going on in the 6 inches between the ears.
Mm.
And it has gotten to a point where I feel like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost feels like mental health professionals feel disrespected in the
Mm.
form of, hey, and some mental health professionals are MDs, but hey, just because I don't
Mm.
have an MD, I still went to school just as long. I still have a PhD or a master's degree. I still spent the same amount of money in college tuition or college debt
Yeah.
as an MD doctor, and you're paying us 60, 70, if you're lucky, maybe 80% of what
Mm.
an MD is going to get paid.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're not off base whatsoever. I definitely think It is a constant struggle for some individuals in our space, especially with LPCs. Most of us being at a master's level, there are times where it feels like we are stuck. We are given the burden of proof that we belong in the space, that we are offering an actual valid treatment. Even the format itself is valid, and therefore it should be, respected as such, given the same time, attention, resources, money. And of course, I'm not going to argue that we should make the same as a psychiatrist. I would love that. That'd be great. But to an extent that there's some sort of, balance to the system, that the math does the math and it makes sense, which in a lot of cases, it really doesn't currently. You're correct. I'm reminded very constantly by my family. In their opinion, I should have just kept going and got my PhD, got my doctorate, like my father. I went to school long enough, paid the same amount of money almost at this point. With that being said, again, it's kind of like picking which avenue you want to go into, and being able to help people to the level and the direct care that we at least attempt to do in more the counseling focused field. I mean, it does require sacrifice on a lot of different fronts. And we went into it, at least hopefully, a handful of us went into it with that understanding that it, in some ways, is an uphill battle. And I think even to an extent, I like that challenge. And I know Dr. Taylor, our CEO, he did too. That was very early on in our conversations was, this is where we stand as a profession, not just in, the great state of Texas, but in the great spans of just, whether United States or even outside the United States. And I do think it's not necessarily gatekeeping like some people think. I'm sure it's part of that. It's a young field. I mean, I think it officially was born when I was like in '90. Like it kind of gives you that insight of like, hey, we grew up together. But it also plays back to, I like that you started with the whole grave robber, analogy to start things, because it's true. The reason they had to do that is because it was so taboo. It was hands off. You didn't talk about it. You weren't allowed to touch a body for, religious and other reasons and practices back then. So they weren't afforded the opportunities to grow in a way that, of course, maybe we would have preferred that they have grown, not running off of people's, corpses. So it's the same thing, I think, in mental health, because it's taboo, because you don't go there. It's, a huge stigma about it. It kind of just for the entire space of mental health makes it more difficult for us to grow and develop at the same rate and maybe at the same kind of pattern you would want it to do, maybe in comparison to like the medical field. And furthermore, we just have a mentality of the medical model is kind of what we call it when we're in school. It's the medical model. Everything's physical. We live in a physical world. What I see, what I can touch, like you said, that's what I can fix. And I'm not necessarily here to say that that's right or wrong, but I do think one of the unintended outcomes in treating people via that model is people, whether it's their physical health, even, and especially their mental health, like we're talking about today, they've just been hands off now. They're like, well, I can't do anything about it. I need to go to the doctor. I have to take this pill. I have to get this surgery. Oh, it's not working, amputate it. And we've created this culture and this mindset that we are helpless and that we always have to go to somebody else to get help. And maybe that sounds counterintuitive to the fact that, of course, I sell services that I want people to come to us for. But our goal is frankly to get you in a position where, you're capable of, it's the whole, everyone always talks about, right? You can give them a fish, you can teach them to fish. Counseling really is geared towards teaching you how to fish and then, wishing you your best life. As much as my clients don't like me reminding them, the reality is the best day in therapy is going to be hopefully our last day. And it's like, good luck. See you later. Hopefully not, though.
Well, I'm glad you brought up a couple things with we live in a physical world and
Mhm.
you know, Western medicine has been so conditioned to, oh, this pill will fix it.
Right.
And not to digress too much, but we've seen sometimes where
Mhm.
this take this pill to fix it mentality can lead us. There's a lot of
Yeah.
documentaries on OxyContin and how many
Oh, yeah.
lives that pill destroyed.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And yeah, I do agree. We live in a, you know,
Mhm.
I don't want to get too deep into quantum physics, but yes, there are things that there's physical matter, right?
Right.
But in almost anyone who's at all studied in the fields of, let's just say, success, business success, you've heard a Tony Robbins video, or you listen to Jordan Peterson or read Jordan Peterson's book, or Ed Milet, whoever that you like.
Right.
Pick one, and almost all of them are going to come back and say, hey, that fear that you feel or that stress that you feel isn't real, in this fact of you can't touch it, you can't pick it up and throw it. It's real, but it's inside of here.
Exactly.
And so I would say a lot of people live in almost like little mental prisons. And there's a lot of science and research, neuroscience specifically, that would say, one of the things that's really keeping people locked up is, I call it pings, rings, and dings. So one of the things I did was, I'm actually a certified peak performance coach as well. And it took it wasn't like it wasn't a master's degree, but it was a nice about 6-month process, a lot of classes. I wrote a book about it. And I bring that up because, especially for highly successful people in modern day society, is they're dealing with a different type of stress that our brains have not evolved really well yet to cope with. So one of the things that I found that really helps me is, maybe you've heard of this. This is a timer, a Pomodoro timer.
Oh, yeah.
And it has different increments for how much time I want to spend on a focused task.
Sure.
And one of the first things I learned was the importance of time blocking. And if you're constantly moving from something that requires a lot of mental attention to, say, you get a ping on your Outlook or a ping on your Slack channel, and then your phone buzzes, and you're going to and from all these different tasks, it raises what they call cognitive load. And you basically put your body into a constant fight or flight state. And like for me, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, you have just cortisol. For me, I just get cortisol racing through my veins. I can feel the physiological response. And it has nothing to do with something that, I fell down and cut my knee.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's that parasympathetic response constantly wired. We are very much, especially this day and age with technology, it's afforded us a lot of great things, but it's also wired us differently. We've been very much conditioned. There's, a great little documentary on Netflix for those who want to check it out. Can't remember the title right now, but they kind of go through some of the science of that. Where, there are people, it's literally a science where they are paid to figure out all the best ways to create those fun little notifications and badges and dings and dongs that constantly keep your brain addicted to that response. You find yourself, it's why you have, I think early on we used to talk about, what was it, the phantom vibration, right? With the phone going off in your pocket. It used to happen to me too, drove me crazy. And it's because our brain becomes wired after time to be looking out for those responses. And it's sad because it really kind of talks to the fact that they're supposed to be there. Our brain is supposed to keep us protected. It's supposed to keep us safe. But we live in a world where, like you were saying, we're constantly, in some ways, almost poisoning ourselves with our own neurotransmitters and chemicals that we don't necessarily need to be juicing up as much. Back in the day, it was okay. Maybe, using a fun example, you might have had a caveman running from a saber-toothed tiger. That was dangerous for him. And then otherwise, life was good. And, you did what you had to do. Nowadays, we see threats not as actual threats to life, but simple stuff like, oh, I forgot to pay my mortgage. Oh, I'm late to this appointment. I got fired from a job. It's not me trying to belittle people's life circumstances, but at the end of the day, and this is one of my favorite memes from a terrible movie, I always go back to it. I always say it to my friends all the time. It's like, but did you die? Like, are you safe? Are you okay? And the answer is almost always yes. And that's where it's like, okay, so then you're not really supposed to be wiring that part of the brain. Your brain doesn't need to be sending off those alarm signals. It is not a code red situation. Put the phone down, step away, take some deep breaths, slow down, come back to it later, whatever be the case. And then that, of course, rolls into all different types of stuff. We have therapists that are huge into teaching, like, polyvagal theory and proper responses to that. How do you, even something simple like starting with awareness and then controlled breathing,
Mhm.
kind of rehack your own system to get it to respond the way it's supposed to. And that's one of the most difficult parts about, treating individuals in the mental health space is they come into our sessions. They know for a fact that anxiety is what we're talking about right now. Anxiety and stress response is bad, and I need it gone. But if I asked them, if you took this pill or did this surgery, it would remove all physical pain whatsoever. And I explained to them what it would actually look like, because there are individuals who have those conditions where they don't feel physical pain. If I went down that rabbit hole and explained to them all the dangers and issues of not being able to feel physical pain, I would hope at least that the response would be, yeah, that sounded nice, but no thanks, Mr. Buck. I'm not going to do that. That's a terrible idea. Same goes for anxiety, whether you want to hear it or not. It's a mental pain that needs to be there. It is supposed to serve a function. And right now we are just, I wouldn't say abusing it, but we're being abused by it by programming it incorrectly, essentially. And everything around us is helping program us further in the wrong direction.
Y- You know, and I think the documentary you speak of might be The Social Dilemma, and it's an
Mhm.
epidemic at the youth level. It's
Oh,
very
absolutely.
sad.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a deep rabbit hole. A lot of people have become fanaticized on the political spectrum, both left and
Hmm.
right, through social media, and
Sure.
it can become a very dark place if you're on it,
Right.
at all, really.
It's the
Um,
irony that I'm connected to everyone on the planet while still feeling absolutely isolated, and it
yeah.
takes away true, personal connections. I mean, yeah, it's great that you and I can hop on this call and do this interview via the computer, you in Texas and me out here in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. But at the end of the day, you and I in a heartbeat would have done this in person if our calendars aligned and our schedules aligned the same way we believe in doing therapy in person. No doc or, hit against telehealth, which is phenomenal in of itself for other reasons, but not having that in-person interactions, even worse than through the pandemic recently.
Hmm.
People are becoming too comfortable in not having any actual real connections with one another. And frankly, it's just easier to not be your best self when you're semi shielded in a digital space. Granted, that's changing nowadays. Now, you might make an accidental tweet that sounds wrong, and then good luck, have a nice day. Your career's over. Fair enough, though that may be, it's still not a genuine space for people to connect on a real level. So it does. It creates isolation, and especially for the youth, they're supposed to be learning how to develop those social connections and relationships and attachments. They don't have it figured out yet. They don't
Hmm.
pop out of the box brand new, put together with all their programming installed. That's not how this works. People need to be reminded of that. So during this time that they're supposed to be growing and developing and learning these things, we're essentially teaching them a different approach. And I think obviously we have already started to see the negative ramifications of that. We will continue to. It's one of the reasons why one of our big partnerships, Tailored Counseling Group, is the Grant Halliburton Foundation. They do
Hmm.
a ton of good work in schools, in the Texas and Dallas area, especially to kind of help youngsters, youth, teens to focus on their mental health, to realize it's okay to talk about mental health, to destigmatize it, and to very much realize that sometimes your mental health is absolutely being affected by things such as, your social media habits and things of that nature. So it provides them some good tools and resources. It helps them in building more genuine, real relationships. So it's definitely an important mission for us, and one that I think parents, teachers, whoever, whatever position you are in life, I think it's worthy of your attention for sure.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I have a lot of respect for Taylor Counseling Group, you, Dr. Taylor. is how much you guys really do for the community and all the different types of free value that you all are providing to the community, the whole state of Texas, but also nationally.
Mm,
I know it's more Dr. Taylor's app, but I have been I've used the Epiphany app, and
correct.
it's very well done. For anyone listening, the Epiphany app, EMPIFANY. So I really like the name. It's almost like
Mhm.
empathy and epiphany put together. That was a
You
clever
got it.
name. And
Yeah, there's a fun story behind the branding and the choosing of the name. We won't get into it today. I don't know if I'm allowed to share that story, but a lot of thought and time and back and forth went into that. But yeah,
I bet.
Epiphany
Well,
is a fun app.
the app is very well done, and one thing that I really
Mm,
enjoy about it is it's not a fly by night
mm,
company, and it uses real evidence based, practical,
correct.
mental health theory, mental health
Mm,
practices to help people at a very,
right.
very low cost. And you even said for some patients who can't afford, I think it's a $4.99 a month cost, you
Right.
give them
Yeah.
a code where they can use that app for free.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, if you're in a position where you want to try out the app, like absolutely find me, get a hold of me, go through the website, whoever else, they absolutely get you a code, try out a month for free, a couple months, whatever be the case. We have a program where, of course, you're a client with Tailored Counseling Group. You're going to automatically get access to that as well. It's great because it was founded by Dr. Taylor and his good buddy, Dr. Paul Stanford, both phenomenal in their fields, but it is an app built by counselors. Even the lesson plans are written out by different mental health professionals, counselors, LMFTs, psychologists. Like this was built, everything is very much clinically minded because that's how it was created. But it was developed by people who have clinical practices. They work with people on a day to day basis like all of us. They have many apps on their phone too, so they kind of love that user friendly approach. So it was just a fun passion project for them to start. That they realized, there are other things out in that space that do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it's not really from that clinical perspective. It doesn't integrate the same level of things. So it's just a great tool for individuals to have who want a positive, a positive application on their phone that they can go to, whether it's just hopefully a regular routine of theirs, there's lesson plans, there's journaling, there's all kinds of fun stuff like that. Or if it's just, hey, I need something real fast that's within reach, I'm feeling a little stressed out. I can go there, I can pick stress, anxiety, follow it down, and then either lesson plan, meditation, something like that. That's going to assist them in that moment.
yeah, and I bring that up because it's a good microcosm
Mm,
of kind of the macro of what I think would actually bring some real positive change in the healthcare system in the United States. So the microcosm is a very affordable, inexpensive app.
mm,
And at some point, it would be nice to see how many people did this app help
mm,
for this very low cost, right?
right,
And what were their clinical outcomes? And did those clinical outcomes, which I would say empirically, if someone is mentally, emotionally healthier, they're going to be physically healthier, which
right,
means that they're going to suffer from less physical disease. They're going to be going to the doctor less. They're going to be going to work more. They're going to be more productive at work. They're going to be a better, economic producer on a macro level.
right,
And that is what's going to curb the for the nerds like me who look at the trajectory of the trillions of dollars that we spend in healthcare spending every year. And that's one
right,
of the biggest missions of our federal government, of CMS, of the insurance companies,
mm,
is curbing that trend line to plateau it and even starting to get it to decrease
right,
basically. But to do that, we have to increase the health of the population of the United States as a whole, which
mm,
right now we know on per capita, we spend more than any other country on healthcare. And also, unless it's changed recently, we are the most unhealthy population in the
right.
world.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% correct.
obesity, diabetes, heart disease. And if you actually look at the stats, I think those are the top three: diabetes, obesity, and heart disease.
Right.
And and we all know cancer is horrible, but we hear the horror stories of cancer a lot. But like
Mhm.
the top three killers are actually diseases that can prevented through lifestyle change.
Right. Yeah. You can always make that argument that they are the ones that we can control the most. And that's definitely one of those things. I think, we were talking about that yesterday. You and I both have a history of even ourselves fighting with healthy habits, having a healthy relationship with food in and of itself. I always just joke. It's like, I'm American. That's how this goes.
Yep.
Right. Because it points to those statistics. But yeah, our mental health very much is going to track with our physical health. I think, again, from the medical model standard, they might try to argue that, or maybe it's not that they're arguing it or fighting it, they're just slow to accept it and to kind of move with the, again, it's still very much taboo, even in the medical space. They feel safe with what they're doing. They think they've got it figured out. They're not, I think, ready to make the full step into the mental health space yet. But at the same time, if you go to your standard practitioner, you go for a regular well check or whatever you got going on, your primary care is gonna ask you about your mental health. They're
Yeah.
always gonna ask you about it, to the point where, and not to overstep boundaries, but they might even kind of, okay, well, let me prescribe you this, and that's where even I, both developing from the medical field myself, first and foremost, now being in mental health, I believe it goes both ways. I believe respect boundaries and professional limits of competence both ways. I get it.
Hmm.
I watched my father go through medical school. Y'all know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. I have utmost respect for you, but stay in your lane. and that's where it's like, look, I get you're trying to help, but throwing pills at people is not how we approach the mental health, epidemic that we're having, especially post pandemic. So yeah, it does directly correlate. And if we are able to start using, whether it's applications or other different metrics that just naturally, I think, are collected in general through treatment and care, we can start really, kind of, proving and showing like, hey, this works. This is working. This is absolutely, and they always talk about it, right? Evidence based. Like, what is evidence based? So it is very much a responsibility of us in the mental health field to prove this is evidence based. This is, valuable. And of course, the longitudinal benefits of investing now. And that's how investments work. You
Hmm.
can't be mad that you're not making millions of dollars on Apple stock or, on Bitcoin. You were supposed to invest back then, guys. Sorry, that's how the system works. Now's the time to invest. And I think it's clear, especially again after the pandemic, everyone talks about mental health. It's one of the number one popular topics. But on the higher level of whether it's politicians to whoever is running and managing different medical, whatever, it's on us. It's on us to say, look, we're actually taking it serious, not just talking about it, not just, doing fun little interviews or posting cute little pamphlets or whatever social media things online, but doing
Hmm.
something about it. And part of that absolutely is getting the metrics behind it to support it, to show there are actual benefits, that if your mental health is improved, not only are you behaviorally going to approach things differently. I kind of see addiction being not this boogeyman. It's not like, hey, you have a drunk uncle and so sad for him, he's an addict. No, I think humans, just by the way that we are programmed, we are programmable. And because we're programmable, and that's how our brain is supposed to work, we are all very much prone to addiction. People talk about alcohol, drugs, and all the fun stuff, but our biggest issue in this country really is food and technology. And
Hmm.
if you're sitting around all day enjoying that lovely technology while pounding down all the terrible food that we eat on a daily basis, it's not going to look great for you. And honestly, yeah, physically speaking, that's a big bummer. But it speaks definitely more to your mental state, that is the life that we choose for ourselves. And I'm, again, not standing from a place of judgment, Been there, done that. I am 100% a trash panda. I will get into the cupboards late at night if my wife does not keep me away from it and eat the Girl Scout cookies that Dr. Taylor sent me. 100%. But, are those the types of habits that we really want to build? And again, are these the habits we want to teach our children?
Right. Right. And so, from a macro level, it's all about getting the data so that we can
Right.
have research and statistics to show that, hey, if we invest X amount of dollars in our mental health, we're going to end up saving X billions, X trillions of
Right.
dollars later on, because we're going to have less catastrophic, less heart attack, less heart disease, less diabetes. We're going to have higher work performance. People are going to have more disposable income. That's
Right.
where we kind of have to get. And I think from a macro
Mhm.
perspective, from a legislation and political perspective,
Mhm.
we need to, and this goes not just for mental health too. There's this big movement to population-based healthcare or value-based care. It
Right.
takes a lot of coordination between different doctors, different specialty groups, a lot
Mhm.
of sharing of information that right now our healthcare infrastructure isn't built to do. And a
Mhm.
lot of that is for regulatory purposes when it comes to HIPAA. And
Right.
I'm all about privacy, so I'm not making any proclamation. It is just that if we really want to get to where I think most people want to get in healthcare, and
Mhm.
whether and that's both on mental health and your more traditional medical, is we're going to have to really rethink how are we going to do this in respect to HIPAA, in respect to patient privacy? What can we share?
Right.
What can we not share? What systems and API structures and technology are we going to put in place to share that data?
Right.
And do we need to rethink a different way? Because I do think privacy is important. Do we need to
Mhm.
rethink a different way to protect patient privacy? So
Right.
much with AI and machine learning, and it's not just the healthcare field, the legal field, the accounting field, all of
Mhm.
these, you know, very kind of established industries are really going to have to look in the mirror and say, what what needs to change so that we can remain efficient and we can actually get to where we know we need to get, but historically we didn't have the technology, and so we have certain regulations and certain legislations that at this point are a little bit outdated.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's been such a large leap in such a short period of time. I mean, when I started this, there were still paper files in the offices I was working at. And I mean, I've been doing it for a handful of years, but not that long in the grand scheme of things. We went to having stacks and stacks of papers that in and of itself is a nightmare. And you're always locking them down and then locking that behind another lock and another lock to keep it all compliant. And then maybe you get to throw yourself a fun party 7 years down the line and burn it all, shred it, right? So you finally dump all the files. Now that things are easier, just like with everything else in life, it's easy to become lax. It's easy to even forget that that's something that we need to be focusing on. So, I mean, I definitely very much appreciate your approach and understanding that it's not as simple as we have all this data and it's so great. Let's go out and use it tomorrow. There is a huge responsibility for all of us who do or do not have any types of metrics to use them well and to use them safely and to use them with the highest level of respect and regard for our patients, our clients, their privilege, their privacy, their right to confidentiality. So I mean, yeah, they're great questions for men who are capable of putting their heads together and workshopping what's the best approach. I know you and we always get sidetracked on that topic half of the phone calls we have, so it's a fun thing for us to continue workshopping as well. But it is important. It is important that we find a way to efficiently collect that data, right, without disrupting care, without making it feel like we're just hounding our poor clients, and pulling teeth to get that data and those metrics. And then we have to find a way to make it make sense and distill it in a way that not only achieves what, of course, we're hoping to achieve, whatever those outcomes may or may not be. At least we're able to point clearly to what they are, And
Hmm.
again, do so in a way that it keeps parties protected at the same time. And it can be done, absolutely can be done. It's been done in a lot of other different areas, but developing a system to do all of that and to do it well and to do it efficiently. Again, it's an important project. It's something that people need to be working towards, and it's an investment of time and resources that, like with all of this, it has to start now. And it's whether are we saving money on the medical front? We're, like you said, we're now reducing the need for care, the frequency of care, the severity of care. But it also, even past that, like how much do we spend, whether state or federal, in like social service related things? Like if we focused on mental health and how they affect, of course, families from a family systems perspective as well, I'm definitely going to have to argue, and I've seen some research as well that does show like when you're able to invest in families at that level, both with not just the kiddos, but the parents themselves, we see better outcomes. We see, healthier, maintained structure, no, not as many, split families, and that's promoting generational change. And that's
Hmm.
a big part of it. We talk about generational trauma. It's a thing. It's real, absolutely a real thing, whether it's a people group, a culture, or a country as a whole. And if we're going to actually truly take it serious, we have to understand it's going to take generational change, generational work, a generational investment. And it started yesterday. We should have been investing, which I believe we have been, right? But we
Hmm.
should continue that conversation. How do we further invest? How do we continue to invest? What does that look like? And I think, that we will, if we do make that investment, see a positive ROI return, maybe not to the level we want to see in even our lifetimes. Maybe not. Maybe it'll take a handful of decades, but even in my practice, even with my small caseload, I can see the ripple effects of the
Yeah.
work that my clients and I do together. I always, challenge them, but validate them in the fact that the work that they do seems small and insignificant, but I help point them to all the areas of life where it really did create a not just the collaborative growth like we talked about, but truly a transformational change. And again, one that ripples out beyond them, their children, their friends, their coworkers, their community, right? So, I mean, it's absolutely worth doing for all of us.
And I bring that up to say because it does take investment of time and resources.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
I bring that up to say, to everyone who's listening, like be patient. There are good people who are working towards
Mhm.
that. But this kind of gets back to where we kind of started. There's a business aspect of this, and
Mhm.
like for me, my small company, I have to get to a point of cash flow where I can start thinking more long term and
Right.
think of, okay, I'm going to spend my time here, and I know I'm not going to see a return on this time for maybe 1, 2, 3, 10 years later.
Mhm.
And at some point, I'll have built a company to be able to do that. And same for you, but not many people are in that position,
Right.
and you have to first kind of conduct your business responsibly to
Mhm.
even get to a point where you can afford to say, hey, I'm going to take the next month or 3 months to have a special project and devote this much time to it. And I know I'm not going to see a dollar, and it may not ever lead to another dollar. Um, but you got to get to a point where you can pay your mortgage and take care of your family and invest that time. And that takes a
Right.
little while. So,
Mhm.
for the anyone out there watching who's thinking, oh, it's great you say all these things, but where is it? Well, as soon as people like you and I get the extra, we'll call it discretionary time and discretionary
Mhm.
income, it will come to fruition. But
Right.
it takes patience, and we're planting seeds.
Right.
Um, and I
Yeah,
think,
patience and discipline, 100%. I mean, with
yes.
all things in life, it will get you there, but 100% with a lot of things, it is the tortoise approach versus the hare in some scenarios. It's understanding that, yeah, parties such as yourself and I, with time, given enough space and resources, inevitably we will continue to do the work that we do together, and at least in relation to one another, coordinating that, but it's also, again, a big part of why I love doing even these types of things is even if it's not me, it's okay. Like if I can advocate for change, if I can, just give someone that little nudge that they needed to be like, you know what, you're right. I will go to therapy. Or maybe it's someone in the political space. It's like, I will, sit down again. I heard about that bill. I'm going to give it another look and maybe we can do something about it. Maybe it's professionals in the field who say, I maybe have an idea of what I could at least start doing on my end. I'm now going to take that step forward in the right direction. It's just understanding that if we all pretend like it's someone else's responsibility, then it's not going to get done, right? It's that observer effect is am I remembering that
Right.
correctly?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's the
So
expectation that
you
someone
got
else
it.
will do it for you.
Exactly. And I don't want to be a control freak, as is my nature, and say, it's going to get done right. I got to do it myself. That's not the attitude. It's simply put, it needs to get done. Why not me? Or why not at least me taking a part? Even if it's a small part to play in it, I'm okay with that as long as I'm doing it for the right reasons, right? It's
Mhm.
authentic to self, to my mission. And I do believe it's going to help other individuals. So if this is just another even small step in the right direction, great. I'll take it. I'd rather be taking small steps than none at all, because that's what kind of keeps us stuck a lot of times. People look at the grand scheme of things, they say, man, that's too big, there's too much to do, and it terrifies them and it shocks them into a position of stagnation. And the reality is just no, just take that tiny step forward, just make that phone call. That's it. You make a phone call today, and then maybe tomorrow send an email. Simple stuff like that. Anything that we can do to tiptoe even in the right direction is monumental, because again, in the long run, it's going to add up. It absolutely is going to add up. And I think you will live a life that you feel grateful for, and hopefully individuals ahead of you further will be grateful for that investment. I almost said sacrifice, but I mean, what really are we sacrificing by investing in helping others and serving others? I mean, I truly believe that that's where value is intended to go, and where value always will automatically return from anyways.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And I think as we come up on the hour here, one thing that I want to put out there is I have a theory of another reason why mental health is kind of taboo. And if I can just make one little comment that might help people get to the point where they're willing to seek help, because a lot of
Hmm.
people do need help, is just because people seem like they have it all together. I have sought mental health services for myself throughout my life. I know
Hmm.
you have too. There's it is okay to seek what you need.
Right.
And the other thing about it is I think it's a little bit taboo, because one thing that I learned through my therapy is most people go through trauma. Most people have
Hmm.
adversity in their life, and mo- what I learned was we all have, at some point, intrusive thoughts, or there's a really good book called Untethered. You can look at all the different
Hmm.
theories. We have an inner dialogue, we have an inner voice, and we have thoughts that are dark or depressing or sad or angry or whatever the case may be. And I had to learn how to kind of sit objectively myself with those thoughts, with those feelings, and
Right.
understand that just because I have a thought doesn't mean it's me or from me. And I
Hmm.
can let that thought move on and I don't have to internalize it. But
Right.
I think some people are afraid or too uncomfortable to sit with some of their own dark thoughts long enough to make that observation of, oh, hey, this isn't me.
Right.
Because that takes some courage and some bravery. And so
Oh yeah.
for anyone who's listening, I encourage you to seek out, even just through the app or online resources, listening to Dr. Taylor's podcast, this podcast, whoever the case may be, is we all have things that we think of that aren't great thoughts.
Right.
and they don't define us. They don't make us who we are unless we let them.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree. And that is a big part of it. It is okay to say that you're not okay. There's even a foundation for that. We were able to partner and invest, over 100 grand at this point, just stacking $1 of every session, because it's so important for people to realize that it remains taboo as long as we let it. And the more people, even one person at a time, is brave enough to say, look, I'm not okay. And that kind of moves forward, because that's what really we look to each other whether we realize it or not. We want to know, is it okay? Am I safe here? Am I allowed to talk about these things? And I'm very grateful to say that, even for our nation and the world as a whole, one of the maybe few silver linings from the pandemic and some other recent things is people realizing that, yeah, it is absolutely okay to say when you're not doing okay, when you are struggling. And yeah, it does take bravery to admit some things, to look within, to see, what seemingly feels like a darker shadow version or whatever of yourself. But you said it perfectly. It's not really you. Your brain does a lot of fun and funky things, as I try to explain to my clients. It's essentially just a supercomputer processing way too much. And as soon as you understand that and you get comfortable just hanging out with it, observing it, watching it, and not grabbing onto and internalizing every single thing it does, it frees you up to then start to utilize it more effectively. You can grab onto everything and let it drag you, or you can let it go. And that's one of the mantras I try to live by on a daily basis. Let it drag you, or let it go. So I appreciate, again, our time talking today, and being able to put forth another, tiny step in the right direction to advocate for mental health, and to, again, encourage anyone listening that not only is it okay to say that you're struggling, but also you're invited to join us. You're invited to join us in the ongoing, work that we do to not just advocate for one another, but to really invest whatever time, energy, and resources we have together to make this a better place, not just for ourselves, but for our children, and to understand that love is what's going to truly conquer all. Love, and having a healthy mind capable of expressing that love, accepting that love. That's what's going to get us where we need to go.
No, you're exactly right. And so, thank you so much for giving me your
It's a pleasure.
time on this platform. Anyone in the state of Texas, if these words resonated with you, if you do need any type of help, I encourage you, reach out to Taylor Counseling Group. I'm going to leave the link of your website, when I publish this podcast, in the comment section. It's just taylorcounselinggroup.com. They have all sorts of different therapies for different types of individuals. They have a whole plethora of different services and practices. I can't really endorse you guys enough. If maybe you don't feel like you need one-on-one counseling or something like that, the app Epiphany, it's on the iOS store, it's on the Google Play Store. And then Dr. Taylor himself has a couple different podcasts that are on the iTunes podcast. You can look up Dr. Taylor.
Correct. Yeah.
And
For self-examination. Yep.
Yep.
Resources on the website too. If you don't really know what you want, and you just want to poke around, or maybe learn something about mental health related stuff, there's other resources on the website as well. So feel free to hopefully access and use it all as best as possible.
Yep. Thanks again, David.
Thank you.